What's happening, everybody? I am Nolan Kelly here with Ben Rasa. We are breaking down each division in the NFL for your fantasy football teams this year in 2019. We have a wonderful product out right now, including Awesemo's season-long rankings, which are quite interesting and probably a topic for debate for another show. But right now, we're going to get into the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys, New York Giants, Washington Redskins, and Philadelphia Eagles. Ben Rasa, what's happening?
Not much, man. Yeah, we wrangled off the AFC. Now we've taken it down, and now we're ready to break down the other side of it. So this is an interesting division. We got one of the New York teams, which I'm happy to talk about, in my Giants. Not that they're my Giants, but lot of storylines, that's for sure.
All right, let's dive right in. The Dallas Cowboys. So the overarching storylines for this team, Ezekiel Elliott holdout is one of the big stories of the offseason. As well, we have a full season of Amari Cooper. We have Cole Beasley leaving and Randall Cobb occupying the slot. As well, Allen Hurns is out. Jeff Swaim is out. Tony Pollard was drafted in the fourth round and may take over for Ezekiel Elliott. But let's start with the quarterback, Dak Prescott. Weeks 1 through 7 last year, he had 200 passing yards per game, 1.1 TDs, and 7 yards per attempt. As soon as Amari Cooper came over, 274 yards, 1.5 TDs, 8 yards per attempt. Are you buying into those second half numbers at all, Ben?
There's something to it. There's no doubt about that. But obviously, the whole thing, and you mentioned it already, that looms over this team is Zeke. He's one of the few running backs, in my opinion, that you really just can't replace. I'm a Tony Pollard guy. I liked him out of Memphis. But at the same time, I think Dak and everybody else is going to need Zeke there if they're going to be a dynamic offense this year.
Fair enough. Although I feel like Pollard could be, at least a decent replacement with that offensive line going. You never know. I don't know if you're on team running backs don't matter, but it's possible that with that offensive line, they might not even miss a beat without him.
I'm a Pollard guy too. I have no problem with him. I do think though that if Dak is going to have a ceiling year, he needs all the help he can get, and if Zeke is not there, it's going to put a lot of pressure on him. Obviously, Cobb and Cooper on the outside.
What are you doing with Amari Cooper? He was a boomer bust option last year with the Cowboys. Two of his games accounted for 60% of his receiving yards last season. I'm sure everyone remembers that Thanksgiving crazy game last season where he went ham. Are you drafting him this year? Is he too much of a boomer bust option for season long? And what are you doing with him in best balls?
So that's the difference, I think, the distinction that I'm making. Obviously, if he falls in a season-long draft, I'm happy to take him because the upside is there. But on a week-to-week basis, I think you're better suited maybe attacking in best ball where, obviously we're going more for a ceiling type of thing. And I have no doubt that Amari is going to have some big games this year. I just don't know how low that floor really is.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. I think he's a great best ball pick. I would have real fear rostering him as my wide receiver one maybe in season long. But if you're getting him as like your third guy in, he can win you a week on his own. Let's wrap things up with tight end. Any interest in Jason Witten or any of these other guys in the picture in Dallas, or just full fade?
Full fade for me. I don't really see a need to go there. There's some other tight ends across the league that I'd rather take a shot with.
I am 100% in agreement with you. Apparently, Witten is not going to play a full amount of snaps this year, so that does not sound like a recipe for success. All right, let's move on to Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants. We have the loss of Odell Beckham Jr. is the big story for this team. It'll be interesting to see if they'll be able to find a field stretcher with him gone. They've added Golden Tate, who's suspended for 4 games. They've added Daniel Jones with the 6th overall pick, who's looked really good in preseason. They are hurting at wide receiver. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to find any kind of field stretcher in this offense, especially with Corey Coleman going down. What are you doing with Saquon Barkley here? Are you drafting him number 1 overall? Is he more like number 4 overall? And do you think he'll be hurt by the lack of ability for this team to throw deep with possibly going up against 8 in the box all the time?
That's going to be an issue. There's no doubt. Teams aren't stupid, and they're going to quickly realize that taking Saquon away is the key. Having said that, the volume is going to be massive. He's incredible. He can catch the ball. We know that. Targets are going to be massive. So I have no problem taking him right off the top. That would actually be my preferred choice. But the guy I want to mention, and it's just touching upon what you said about the lack of vertical threats. To me, this is a spot for Evan Ingram to really take some steps in this offense. Really athletic tight end. He should be a focal point for Eli. And I think if he can stay healthy, we saw in spurts last year the ceiling that he really possesses.
He was excellent with Beckham out of that lineup
Yep.
last season. Over the final 4 games, he tallied at least 75 yards in every single one of them. So I think he's a pretty, if you want to go a round or two deeper than OJ Howard, as far as a best bet for a tight end to break out and move into that upper echelon, I think Ingram's one of the guys that I'm targeting for sure. Do you have any interest in these wide receivers? Golden Tate out for the first 4 games. Sterling Shepard was moved out of the slot, and it looks like he'll line up on the perimeter with Beckham gone. His numbers are quite his splits between slot and the outside are pretty hefty, and they're not impressive. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. But with Golden Tate, I think I'm a little bit interested in taking him if he falls in best ball drafts, because he has the potential to be a target monster in this offense. Where do you land on these guys?
Yeah, that's certainly a buy low situation. You talked about him being, suspended for a portion, but when he comes back, he could certainly bolster that roster. I'm somewhat skeptical though. Ingram is clearly the guy I want to target in the passing game if I do go there. Shepard, he's going to probably draw the best cornerback each week. And as you mentioned, the splits, when he's not in the slot, it is a stark difference. So not a passing attack and not a team, let's be honest, that is forecasted to do a ton this year. I would be really surprised if they even claw to 500.
I am in 100% agreement with you. I think they may be one of the worst teams in the NFL this year, but we will see. Let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles. My vote for one of the talented, if not the most talented roster in the entire NFL. Love this organization. They use in-ear play calling analytics to determine their plays. They use a lot of play action. They are one of the most forward-thinking organizations around. Offensive additions, they've added Deshaun Jackson as a field stretcher. Andre Dillard is their first-round pick out of Washington State. Jordan Howard moves over from the Chicago Bears. Miles Sanders enters the offense. Jjrc Whiteside comes over from Stanford. That's a lot of weapons. What are you doing with the quarterback situation to start off with here? Carson Wentz has the easiest schedule for the fantasy playoffs. Are you high on him at all this year, Ben?
I am. This is a guy that not too long ago, right in the thick of the MVP race, caught some injuries. The Nick Foles thing is really overshadowed. And I understand there's a lot of pressure on Wentz, in real football to perform in the playoffs. But from a fantasy perspective, this is a guy that we have seen the talent you just mentioned. He had weapons, and now he's adding in a handful more. Miles Sanders obviously going to bolster that running game. Jjrc Whiteside, another huge weapon with Ertz. The sky's the limit for a guy like Wentz if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think I'm a little bit I'm into Wentz. I find I'm not getting a lot of him at his current ADP because there's so many quarterbacks there. But it's a really interesting pick, I think, in best balls, especially with that super easy schedule down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs. He could be on that best ball winning lineup for tournament championships. Let's move on quickly to wide receiver. Jjrc Whiteside comes from Stanford, where he had 14 touchdowns last season. Huge, big body red zone threat. He was a popular pick early on in drafts. I'm not super high on him because I just don't think there's enough ball to go around here. They don't really run a lot of 11 personnel with two tight ends on the field a lot. You've got Jeffrey ahead of him. You've got Deshaun Jackson ahead of him. That's a lot of options in this offense, and I'm a little bit worried there just aren't enough targets to go around. What's your take on this wide receiving core?
He's a guy that, if you're playing in a really specific type of league, say it's a keeper league, a dynasty league, I think you should look at him. I love him as a player, but I agree his current role, unless somebody goes down or something changes, doesn't scream major production right off the bat. But guys like Zak Hertz, obviously, and then you mentioned the receiving core, they're going to have plenty of balls to go around. Running back's a little murkier just because they have, for the past couple of years, there's been a lot of bodies in there. Seems like Miles Sanders is going to get first crack possibly and plenty of opportunity to produce, but there's still a lot of guys vying for touches.
Yep, a lot of guys in this backfield. I have been fading Miles Sanders to this point, maybe grabbing a little bit because he just has some upside, but this backfield just has timeshare written all over it. I know our colleague Lofty thinks the opposite, and then Miles Sanders is going to take the lead with this, so we will see about that. Quickly, let's wrap up with tight end. Zak Hertz is going as the second or third tight end, I should say, overall right now. He had a career season last year, and if you look at his numbers, that was much higher than any of his previous fantasy season. So I'm a little bit bearish on him at his current ADP, and I think he'll probably regress a bit. And then you've got Dallas Goedert, who the Eagles have both tight ends on the field for 30% of their snaps last season, using 12 personnel at the third highest rate in the league. Are you grabbing any Goedert late in drafts, or are you going full fade because there just aren't enough targets?
He's another one where I like the player more than the situation. If something happens and the role changes, definitely look to him because he's shown, when he's on the field, he can produce. It's a lot of mouths to feed. And Zak Hertz is a guy that I like. I think, you're talking best ball and stuff. Really interesting if you can get him and Wentz, obviously get that connection. There is upside there. It's a steep price. I understand that, in season long, you're really going to have to pay up. Obviously, Kelsey up top, but he's right there, with Kittle in that next batch. So, it's steep and there is an opportunity cost, but the guy is just, when he sees the targets, and he usually does, one of the more productive players in the league.
Totally agree. I am a little bit, so I got the numbers pulled up here. He had 1,163 receiving yards and 8 TDs, but in his previous 3 years, he had between 800 and 850 and 74 to 78 possessions or receptions. So his targets went way up last year, and I don't expect that to be sustainable for Ertz. Goddard, I think, is a really interesting flyer in best balls because if anything happens to Ertz, he immediately becomes in the upper echelon tight end one conversation. So if you want to take a risk for a championship style roster, I think that is not a bad move. Let's move on to the Washington Redskins here. We have Dwayne Haskins added to the team. That's pretty much it for offensive additions this offseason. Derrius Guice comes back from an ACL injury, I believe, last offseason. And they have one of the weakest receiving corps in the entire NFL with Josh Doctson, Paul Richardson, and Trey Quinn. Are you doing anything with Dwayne Haskins here? Do you think he's gonna get any playing time towards the end of the season?
It does seem that way, especially if I think this is a 2-team league with the Cowboys and the Eagles battling it out, in all honesty. If the Redskins kind of fall behind, I think Haskins pushes his way into the starting lineup sooner rather than later, to be honest. But from a fantasy perspective, I'm just not there with him. You mentioned the lack of weapons. Tough situation for any quarterback to step into.
All right, oh no, God, I'm spacing
it's the
out
Redskins,
here.
man. I could just wrap them up right now.
Wrap it up. I'm good.
I do want to quickly say, real quick, the one receiver that I am somewhat interested in is Paul Richardson. We saw some flashes when he was with the Seahawks. Super athletic guy. If he can stay healthy, the targets are going to be there. Will they be high efficiency? I'm not so sure on that. But if Guice can provide a little stability in the backfield, say Jordan Reed stays healthy for a change, I could see a guy like Richardson taking the next step this year.
Yeah, I actually don't mind that call. I think one of these receivers has a chance to step up, especially if Haskins is able to win that starting job. Richardson's not a bad bet. Doxson's not a bad bet. I think the problem is that you basically have 4 guys. Trey Quinn's probably going to run at the slot. Terry McLaurin hasn't really been great in camp, but he's a burner, has some chemistry with Haskins. So there are so many options here, and I think what I'm really targeting here is Jordan Reed, though. His ADP in best balls is starting to climb a little bit. He is one of the most talented tight ends in the league if he can stay healthy. We all know that. He is a boomer bust option, I think, from a season-long perspective, who could finish in the top 5 tight ends if he's healthy. Are you drafting Jordan Reed and not worrying about the injury risk?
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite because the opportunity cost is pretty low. You just mentioned his ADP. You're not paying a steep price. It's kind of like the injuries are baked into it. So, yeah, if he goes down, it's obviously not a great situation, but you're not crushed. And the upside is there. You mentioned he could bust into the top 5. I think that's very reasonable with a big season. So this is a guy that the problem is staying healthy, and I'll always take a bet on a guy that we've seen get it done when he's on the field and just hope that this is the year maybe he plays 16 games.
He is one of my favorite targets in best ball too. He's currently going as a tight end 18, though his position is moving up and has been moving up for the past few weeks. But he led Washington in targets and receptions last year, and just 13 games played. And he's only finished outside the top 16 tight ends once in the past 5 years with all his injury woes. So that to me is a bargain. He is my favorite tight end 2 target if I can get someone else ahead of him. If I'm drafting him as my tight end 1, then I'm usually pairing him with 2 other tight ends in best ball just because of the risk factor. All right. Any thoughts on running back here before we get out of here? Derrius Guice, Adrian Peterson, Chris Thompson.
That's the problem. There's 3 of them, and Derrius Guice is a guy, coming out of LSU, I thought could hit the ground running and then just derailed with the ACL. Now he says he's healthy. I had no reason to doubt that, but it feels like you have to kind of get him right multiple times. He needs to be healthy, and then he needs to carve out a role. Obviously, Thompson more of a pass catcher, and AP just can't be stopped. I mean, the guy is he's like in the Frank Gore category. Still going to get some work in this offense. So it's going to be a tough ask to really reach for him. I'll probably take more of a wait and see approach on a guy like that.
Yeah, I think that's the right call here. I think if one of these backs is going to take it and run with it, it's going to be Geis. He was the preseason hype, one of the most hyped players last offseason before he went down. The other guy I'm targeting late in best balls is Chris Thompson. He has some upside as like a 50 to 70 reception, kind of 800 receiving yards back, is a nice addition if you need just like a safe floor play. He should return to his role as a third down back, and he's finished as the RB 31 and 37 over the last two of the last 3 years, and he's currently going as RB 61. So there's a guy who I think is being underdrafted right now. He's not exciting, but he's a safe play. All right, let's get out of here, Ben. We will be back with our next preview, which I believe is the NFC North, the Packers, the Vikings, the Lions, and the Bears. Please feel free to check out all of our season-long content here at Awesemo.com. We have Awesemo season-long projections. We have a number of articles about DFS Week 1 as well that are free to help you get ready for the coming season and prepare and get your strategy all set. So thanks very much for watching, everyone, and we will see you shortly.